She came on top of me, squeezed my face, slapped me.
Jonathan Majors was supposed to be the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He wasn't just another villain in another superhero movie. He was the villain, the next Thanos, the big bad that would define an entire era of Marvel storytelling. Kang the Conqueror was set up to be the most dangerous threat the Avengers had ever faced. A time-traveling genius who existed across infinite timelines, and Jonathan Majors was delivering a performance that had critics calling him one of the best actors of his generation. He had everything: the talent, the charisma, the career momentum, the blank check from Marvel to shape the future of the biggest franchise in Hollywood. And then, in one night, it all came crashing down. Not because of bad reviews, not because audiences rejected him, but because of a domestic violence incident that would end his relationship with Marvel, destroy his reputation, cost him millions of dollars, and transform him from Hollywood's next big thing into an industry pariah. This is the story of how Jonathan Majors went from the top of the world to absolute rock bottom in less than 2 years. And it's one of the most devastating falls from grace in modern entertainment history. Let's start with the rise because you need to understand just how high Jonathan Majors climbed before he fell. Born September 7th, 1989 in Lompoc, California, Jonathan grew up in a military family that moved around constantly. His childhood was unstable, his father left when he was young, his mother struggled to raise him and his siblings while dealing with her own issues. Jonathan has talked about growing up poor, about not always having electricity or consistent meals, about the kind of poverty that marks you permanently. But even as a kid, Jonathan knew he wanted to act. He threw himself into theater in high school, discovered he had genuine talent, and pursued it relentlessly. He got his BFA from the University of North Carolina School of the Arts, then went to Yale School of Drama for his MFA, graduating in 2016. Yale Drama is one of the most prestigious acting programs in the world. Meryl Streep went there. Paul Newman, Lupita Nyong'o. Getting in is almost impossible. Graduating means you're legitimately elite. Jonathan started working immediately after Yale, taking roles in independent films, building his resume, honing his craft. But his breakthrough came in 2019 with 2 films that showcased his incredible range. First was The Last Black Man in San Francisco, an indie drama where he played a sensitive, artistic character with such depth and vulnerability that critics took notice. Then came the Western The Harder They Fall, where he played an outlaw with menace and charisma. These weren't superhero movies or big-budget blockbusters. These were serious films that proved Jonathan Majors was a serious actor. But the role that really put him on the map was in 2020's Lovecraft Country on HBO. Jonathan played Atticus Freeman, a Korean War veteran, navigating racism and supernatural horror in 1950s America. The show only lasted 1 season, but Jonathan's performance was explosive. He could do drama, action, horror, everything. He was magnetic on screen, the kind of actor who commanded attention every time he appeared. Suddenly, Hollywood was paying attention. Suddenly, Jonathan Majors was getting offers from everyone. And then Marvel came calling. In 2021, Jonathan appeared in the final episode of Loki Season 1 as He Who Remains, a variant of Kang the Conqueror. It was 1 scene, 1 episode, but Jonathan absolutely crushed it. He played the character as eccentric, unpredictable, dangerous, funny, all at once. The performance was so good that Marvel immediately locked him into a multi-picture deal. Jonathan Majors was going to be Kang across multiple films and shows. He was going to be the backbone of the multiverse saga, appearing in Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, Avengers, the Kang Dynasty, and potentially other projects. This wasn't just a job. This was a career-defining, generational wealth-creating, legacy-cementing opportunity. At the same time, Jonathan was getting other massive roles. He was cast as the lead in Magazine Dreams, an indie film where he played a bodybuilder dealing with mental illness. His performance was so intense, so committed, that when the film premiered at Sundance in January 2023, critics predicted he'd be nominated for an Oscar. Searchlight Pictures bought the distribution rights for millions, planning to release it during award season. Jonathan was also filming roles in other high-profile projects, building a resume that would make him one of the most in-demand actors in Hollywood. By early 2023, Jonathan Majors was unstoppable. He was on magazine covers. He was doing talk show appearances. He was being profiled as the next Denzel Washington, the next great black actor who would dominate for decades. Quantumania came out in February 2023, and while the movie got mixed reviews, everyone agreed that Jonathan's performance as Kang was phenomenal. Terrifying, complex, powerful. Marvel had found their next big villain. And then came March 25th, 2023, the night everything changed. Jonathan Majors was arrested in New York City following an alleged domestic dispute with his then-girlfriend, Grace Jabari. According to the police report and later court testimony, Jabari claimed that Majors assaulted her in the back of a car, hitting her, grabbing her, injuring her finger, and causing bruising and pain. Majors' legal team immediately denied the allegations, claimed that Jabari was the aggressor, and said that Jonathan was the real victim. The news broke the next day, and Hollywood went into immediate panic mode. Marvel, Disney, his management team, everyone associated with Jonathan Majors suddenly had a crisis on their hands. Domestic violence allegations are career-ending in the modern entertainment industry. It doesn't matter if you're talented. It doesn't matter if you're profitable. Studios cannot afford to be associated with that kind of scandal. Marvel and Disney made no immediate announcements, but the damage was already being done. Articles started appearing questioning whether Jonathan would remain as Kang. Film productions he was attached to went quiet. Magazine Dreams, which was supposed to be his Oscar vehicle, had its release indefinitely postponed. Searchlight, owned by Disney, couldn't release a film starring someone embroiled in a domestic violence case. The optics were impossible. Jonathan hired a high-powered legal team and maintained his innocence. His lawyers painted Jabari as a scorned ex-girlfriend making false accusations. They claimed to have evidence, text messages, and witnesses that would exonerate him completely. Jonathan's PR team went into overdrive, trying to control the narrative, trying to convince the industry that this was all a misunderstanding. But then more information started coming out. Text messages between Jonathan and Grace were leaked to the press, and they were damning. In these messages, Jonathan appeared to be emotionally manipulative, controlling, comparing himself to great historical figures, and demanding that Grace live up to impossible standards. He referenced Coretta Scott King and Michelle Obama, saying Grace needed to be like them, needed to sacrifice for his greatness. The text painted a picture of a psychologically abusive relationship, even if they didn't prove physical violence. Then former associates started speaking out. Stories emerged about Jonathan's behavior on sets, about him being difficult, demanding, sometimes aggressive. None of these were criminal allegations, but they created a pattern. They suggested that the March 25th incident wasn't an isolated event, but part of a larger behavioral issue. The court case dragged on for months. Jonathan was officially charged with assault and harassment. The trial was scheduled for late 2023. Marvel was in an impossible position. They had built their entire next phase around Kang, around Jonathan Majors. Reshooting his scenes from Quantumania was impossible. The film was already released. But how could they continue with him in future projects if he was convicted? Even if he was acquitted, the association with domestic violence allegations could be toxic for their brand. Throughout 2023, Marvel stayed publicly silent, but privately they were scrambling. Reports emerged that they were developing contingency plans, considering other villains, potentially Doctor Doom, who could replace Kang as the main threat. But they hadn't announced anything official. They were waiting to see how the trial played out. Jonathan, meanwhile, was in a nightmare. His career was frozen. Projects were canceled. He lost his role in an MLB biopic about Negro Leagues player Satchel Paige. He was dropped by his management and PR teams. Magazine Dreams remained unreleased, his Oscar hopes completely dead. He went from being in multiple projects a year to having nothing, all based on allegations that hadn't been proven in court yet. In interviews during this period, the few he was allowed to do, Jonathan maintained his innocence with an almost desperate intensity. He talked about being a black man in America, about how the system is designed to destroy men who look like him, about how he was being railroaded. Some people sympathized with this argument, pointing out that black men are often presumed guilty regardless of evidence. Others saw it as a deflection, using racial injustice to avoid accountability for his own actions. The trial finally happened in December 2023, and it was ugly. Grace Jabari testified in detail about the March incident, describing how Jonathan grabbed her hand so hard he broke her finger, how he hit her in the head, how she was terrified. Jonathan's lawyers presented their case, arguing that Grace was lying, that she had attacked him first, that the injuries were either self-inflicted or caused by something else. The jury deliberated, and on December 18, 2023, they reached a verdict. Guilty. Jonathan Majors was convicted of 1 count of assault in the 3rd degree and 1 count of harassment. He was acquitted on other charges, but the convictions were enough. He faced up to a year in jail. The reaction was immediate. Hours after the verdict, Marvel and Disney officially announced that they were parting ways with Jonathan Majors. He was out as Kang. All future appearances were canceled. The character that was supposed to define an era of Marvel films was being scrapped or recast. Avengers, The Kang Dynasty, the film that was literally named after his character, was being retitled and reimagined. This was unprecedented. Marvel had never abandoned a villain this significant this publicly. They'd dealt with actor controversies before, but never at this scale. Billions of dollars of planning, years of setup, all thrown away because their lead actor was convicted of assault. The industry reaction was swift and brutal. Jonathan Majors became radioactive overnight. No studio would touch him. No project would hire him. He went from Hollywood's next big thing to completely unemployable in a matter of hours. Magazine Dreams still hasn't been released as of January 2025. Searchlight has it sitting on a shelf, and there's no indication they'll ever put it in theaters. Jonathan's Oscar-worthy performance will probably never be seen by a wide audience. In April 2024, Jonathan was sentenced. The judge gave him a year of domestic violence programming and a conditional discharge, meaning no jail time if he completed the program. It was a relatively lenient sentence, all things considered. But the legal punishment was nothing compared to the career destruction that had already happened. Since the conviction, Jonathan has tried to rebuild. He's done a few interviews, including a controversial one with Good Morning America, where he still seemed to deflect responsibility, talking about how he's grown and learned, but never quite admitting he did what he was convicted of doing. The interview was widely criticized as tone-deaf and self-pitying. He's also been cast in a few small independent projects, films that can't be hurt by his association because they're already operating outside the mainstream industry. But nothing major. Nothing close to what he had before. Marvel is gone. Big budget films are gone. Awards consideration is gone. The career he spent his entire life building was destroyed in less than 2 years. The tragedy of Jonathan Majors is layered and complex. On one level, it's the tragedy of domestic violence itself, of a woman being hurt by someone she trusted, of a pattern of behavior that caused real harm to real people. Grace Jabari's life was also destroyed by the situation. She's been subjected to online harassment, death threats, racist and sexist attacks from Jonathan's defenders who claim she's lying. On another level, it's the tragedy of wasted potential. Jonathan Majors is genuinely talented. His performances in Lovecraft Country, The Harder They Fall, even his brief appearance as Kang, showcase an actor who could have been one of the greats. But talent doesn't matter if you can't control your behavior, if you hurt people, if you let your worst impulses destroy everything you've worked for. There's also the tragedy of how quickly Hollywood moves on. Marvel announced Robert Downey Jr. as Dr. Doom months after dropping Jonathan as Kang. They pivoted, adapted, kept moving forward. The machine doesn't stop. Jonathan Majors was essential to their plans right up until the moment he wasn't, and then he was immediately replaced and forgotten. That's the brutal reality of the entertainment industry. No one is irreplaceable. Some people argue that Jonathan deserves a second chance, that one conviction shouldn't end his entire career, that the punishment doesn't fit the crime. They point to other actors who've committed worse offenses and still work. They talk about redemption and growth and the possibility of change. Others argue that domestic violence is unforgivable, that Grace Jabari's testimony and the jury's conviction prove Jonathan is an abuser, and abusers shouldn't get platforms or second chances. They say that Hollywood has protected powerful men for too long, and that consequences are finally being enforced. The truth, as always, is complicated. Jonathan Majors made choices that hurt people. He was convicted in a court of law, but he's also been subjected to a level of public destruction that feels disproportionate compared to others who've done worse and faced fewer consequences. The inconsistency in how Hollywood handles these situations is maddening. What's certain is that Jonathan's story serves as a cautionary tale. You can have all the talent in the world, all the opportunities, all the potential, and you can lose it all through your own actions. The Marvel Cinematic Universe was his. Kang the Conqueror was going to make him a household name for the next decade, and he threw it away. As of January 2025, Jonathan Majors is trying to work again, taking small roles, attempting a comeback that may never happen. Magazine Dreams remains unreleased, a monument to what could have been. Kang has been replaced by Doctor Doom in Marvel's plans. The multiverse saga continues without him. The tragic fate of Jonathan Majors is still being written. Maybe he'll find redemption. Maybe he'll rebuild his career in some form. Maybe he'll fade into obscurity. But one thing is certain. He'll never be what he was supposed to be. He'll never be Marvel's next great villain. He'll never have the career that was laid out before him in early 2023 when the world was his and the future was limitless. He had it all. And in one night, through his own choices, he lost everything. That's the real tragedy. Not bad luck, not being in the wrong place at the wrong time, but self-destruction, the most preventable and most devastating kind of downfall. Jonathan Majors destroyed Jonathan Majors, and Hollywood moved on without him.